Hi, friend. Niclas here. Welcome to another episode. On the show today, we have the creative director at Lego, Primus Nair. And I love talking to Primus, and it was awesome learning more about how to generate, how to present, how to validate, and how to sell creative ideas. And it doesn't matter which profession you're in or if you're in the music industry or not, you can still apply the tips, the knowledge Primus shared in this interview. So I really hope you're going to enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And before we get into the interview, please like this video. Please subscribe to the channel, whether that's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. The channel is growing slowly but steadily, and that's all thanks to you. So I really appreciate your support. And if you want exclusive access to interviews before the public, please subscribe to the Audio Tribe email list. There's a link to that in the description below. Just enter your name and email address, and you have joined the Audio Tribe email list. It's free, of course. And if you join, you get exclusive access to interviews before the public. But that's it. Let's get into the interview with Primus Nair. So please enjoy. Primus, well, first of all, man, thank you for taking your time. I know you're
No
probably
worries at
really
all.
busy.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. Actually, I mean, when I first heard your name, Primus, I don't know if you're familiar with the band. Are you familiar with the band Primus?
I am. I've spent a long part of my life just collecting, their stuff. Not because I like the music, but because I see my name on album covers.
Oh yeah.
Um, but yes, they're not a great band, but I am familiar with them. Yes.
But yeah, I mean, did you say you don't like them or you like them?
No, no. I had like one of their cassettes and stuff like that, so I'm okay with them. I'm not. It's not like I don't like them. They're
Ah,
not my
okay,
favorite
okay.
band, but I collected them because I really liked just seeing my name in print, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a cool name, man. Where's the name from? Is it from Singapore? Or are you from Singapore originally? Or
I'm Malaysian. I live in
ah,
Singapore, but it's the name is something my parents got out of the Bible.
ah.
Yeah, so
Maybe that's where the band got it from too. Then I guess.
probably, probably,
Yeah, because I'm not too sure myself. That's
yeah.
cool. I mean, the band is cool. I used to listen
They're
to
not
them a lot
bad.
actually.
Yeah, in the '90s they had some really good stuff, I think. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And the bass player is kind of
yeah,
quirky. That's what
yeah,
it's all
yeah,
about, I guess. Oh, yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. But yeah, again, Primus, thank you for taking the time.
No worries.
Um, so I know you're a creative director for Lego at the moment. And that's always something I wonder. Like, what is a creative director? Like, is it being really creative, or is it actually a lot of admin stuff? What's the deal with that?
It is still a primarily creative role. I'm terrible at admin shit. But
Right, right.
basically, so Lego has the Lego Group has its own internal marketing agency. So we do all of the advertising internally. So all of our films, all of our select promotions and things like that are done internally by what's called the Lego agency. And I'm the head of the Lego agency for APAC. So I'm
Right,
still it's still a creative role. It's not a lot of admin.
right, right.
Um, yeah,
But what's APAC? Is that Asia, or what does it stand for?
it's Asia Pacific.
Yeah, 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 yeah. APAC.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it doesn't include China, but everything else. So it includes like Australia, Japan, etc., but not China.
How come not China? Or they don't like Lego?
No, they do. They do. China's actually one of our bigger markets, and it's actually doing really really well in China. But
Ah,
most marketing organizations globally for most brands like Nike and stuff like that, they separate their marketing departments because China is its own beast. It's huge, and it requires very specific teams and large setups. So we have China has its own marketing structure, and they have their own creative director, and I oversee Asia Pacific.
okay.
Just the scale of China is bananas.
Yeah. I mean, I
Mm.
can imagine. I don't really know how big China is really. I mean, you see it on a map, but I guess that map might be skewed as well. I mean, how big is China?
China's
Do you know?
just slightly more than a billion people, if I'm not
Wow.
mistaken. Yeah, I don't quote me on that, but China's huge, man, and it's one of those really really complex environments where you have lots of different cities that are all on sort of like different sort of in sort of like different ways. But it's also from an ecosystem point of view. Like China's like no other country in the world in regards to how all of their digital ecosystems work. I mean, they don't use
Mm.
Facebook or Google and stuff like that. So all of their platforms are dramatically different. But
Wow.
it's also a really cool place because it's becoming much more creative. There's a really vibrant sort of like art scene as well, especially in places like Shanghai. So it's pretty
Mm.
cool.
Mm. But does China not having social media like Facebook and stuff, does that impact like you guys negatively, or does it become just a different playground, so to speak?
It's a different playground. So they actually have like way more social media platforms than we do.
Oh yeah.
And they have similes for everything that we have, and they also have these ecosystems which are like super apps, which are sort of like apps, but they're their own kind of operating systems as well. So every sort of like social media type of platform that we have, they have something that's fairly similar, and then they have so much more. So China's got a very very vibrant social media scene, but it's just
Right.
not the same apps that we're sort of like used to.
Right. I didn't know that.
It's super cool, man. And if you ever sort of like visit, it's a really interesting experience because it's similar, but it isn't. Everything is fundamentally sort of like comparable, but
Mm.
but it's a completely different landscape in that sense.
Right. I mean, what is your thought about like social media, like Facebook and Instagram and those apps? I'm not talking about China specific now, but just for the rest of the world. Like, what's your thought on that? Because recently I've been thinking the world would be so much better without Facebook. And also with this, I think it was because the new Apple uh, update came out. 14.5. I don't know if you're aware of that, but
Yep, yep,
so they have to ask you and stuff like that. And Facebook was really mad, and I thought it was really good.
yep, yep.
What are your thoughts on that whole topic?
I mean, it's really interesting, man. Like, I think, like all of these really powerful sort of like innovations and stuff like that, it it's got a lot of potential, and anything that has a lot of potential can be really really good, but it also can have bad elements to it. I kind of see sort of like social media a little bit like space, right? You think about space travel is amazing because it allows you to sort of like explore new things, sort of like meet new people, and but at the same time there are dangers attached to it. That level of freedom, that level of power is kind of challenging. But I guess for me, I'm erring on the side of it's probably a little bit more positive than it is negative because, I mean, like we've been in lockdown for like slightly more than a year now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And just being able to sort of like know what everybody's up to, being able to reach out to my mom or my aunt or any of my cousins, just so fluidly and see in some small way be a part of everybody's life. I think that for me is one of the better things about social media. I'm not going to deny that it is a scary space and it can be really shit. And coming from like Lego, we put a lot of time into making safe digital experiences for kids.
Hmm.
So we're very aware of how dangerous it can be. But when you see the sort of like potential it has to connect people, to sort of like keep people in the loop, to sort of like just be able to reach out and sort of like connect with someone. Like if you think of connecting again with somebody that you met in high school, you don't think about, oh, how do I find their number? You look them up on Facebook, or and I think that is something that, I mean, we take for granted, but it's still super cool to be able to do.
Yeah, definitely. I
Mm.
think the thing I struggle with, and I've taken a break from social media again, and I do like every now and then, because my
Good for
problem
you.
is, yeah, thank you. I mean, because my
Yeah,
problem is, my problem is that I always keep comparing myself to others, right? And that for me is the real, I don't know what the word is to use, but the real cancer of social media, if I can say so, where you can feel shit about your life because you keep looking at how great other people have it. But then again, then it's just tinted because it's just social media, so it's filtered, I guess.
absolutely. And I think,
Mm.
it's there is a lot of anxiety attached to it. Like you're right, it's every time you're sort of like seeing it, like the natural inclination that people share is that you're sharing the shiny side of things, filters, etc., and so on and so forth. And I think it's just important to remember that, like, when people share stuff on social media, it is. it is the best. It is the positive stuff that they want to share. You're not seeing the larger picture. So I think, but I completely understand with you, man. I get the same way. I feel a ton of anxiety on social media. So
Yeah.
every once in a while, I just you just go pick up a football or something and just yeah. So I get it. I get it as well completely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a weird world, I guess. Who knows where it's going to end up, the social media stuff. But you
Yeah,
see,
yeah.
but Primus, let's get into the Lego album. Is it called the White Album? No, it's not. That's the Beatles.
Beatles.
What is it? White Noise? Yeah,
It's called White Noise. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
We should have called it the White Album,
yeah,
but no, it's White Noise.
yeah. Damn. Sorry to the Beatles
Mm.
fans.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
but
huge,
yeah, White
huge fan.
Noise. Let's get
Mm.
into the White Noise album because
Yeah.
I saw it first on LinkedIn somehow because I think you guys worked with forgot the name again. What's the company called again you work with in
Fuse.
Los Angeles? Say it again.
No, Fuse.
Oh,
So West One is the publishing
yeah, yeah,
company,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. That was the one. Yeah.
West One's great. They're the publishing company that helped us sort of like get everything up on Spotify and sort of like manage the rights usage and things like that.
Hmm.
The production company that we worked with here is called Fuse, and they're a music production
Right.
house. So
Right.
they're all sort of like slightly more musician based
Right.
shop based in Singapore.
Right. But so take me through, because I mean, you being the creative director, you definitely had a hand in this. But
Yeah,
how did you end up, from wherever you started to let's release this White Noise album with the person building Lego.
yeah. So I think I mean, as a team, I think as a company, we've sort of like recognized for a while now that adults are a huge part of our brand. We recognize that a lot of adults are plugging into to Lego sets, and one of the reasons that we think is why is because it's a really really wonderful way to de-stress or to sort of just like as an activity for mindfulness. I mean, using ourselves as an example, like a bunch of the dudes in our team at the end of a long day, there's nothing quite as nice as sort of like just turning on a podcast or turning on Spotify and stuff like, and just building. You just sort of like zone out. It's a wonderful mindfulness activity, and that was one of the things that we were thinking about communicating. How do we communicate this sort of like this capability that the product has to sort of like help you with mindfulness. And we started thinking about the different ways that we could sort of distill this. Why do people find it so like stress releasing and stuff like that? And I think there's a few things. There's the whole sort of like being able to follow instructions where you go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, which is kind of calming. But personally, we also started to think about just how tactile everything is. The sense of sort of like clicking one brick into the next. It's a really satisfying feeling. The sense of just sort of like running your hands over the bricks as you kind of look for that sort of like missing piece and stuff like that. All of these are sort of like really audible, tactile experiences. Um, and as in, so we tried to sort of like distill that. Okay, so we know that audio plays a role in why this is sort of like coming. How do we make that the experience? How do we sort of like, distill some of this Lego experience and then allow you to sort of get some of those joys when you're not actually playing with Lego?
Hmm.
And I guess the other thing was that, like anybody who's heard Lego sort of knows that sound. It's such an iconic sound, and we learned so much about it during the sort of like process. But it is a very very specific sort of sound. Yeah,
Right. But so is it you as the creative director who maybe you don't come up with all the ideas, I guess, but I guess you have a team around you, right?
I do have a team, and I have to give credit where credit is due. My team are the guys who are largely involved in all the creation and all the core ideation. We've got some really really good guys in the team. We have like an art director called Dale Lum, who's a fantastic Lego builder and art director. We have a content creator called Jiahui Wee, who's again they were the two core guys in the team. And then we've got like digital strategist Samuel Lee. We've got copywriters Adlin Rosalie. We've got copywriters Ektiao and stuff like that. So a bunch of different people who sort of like play into sort of like the creative process. And the way it starts is that we all sort of like sit together in the beginning and we think about, okay, what's going to be the big idea? And once we've decided that, okay, look, this whole white noise thing sounds really, really interesting. Let's play with it. Then the teams go away and they're sort of like building by themselves and they involve me later in the process.
Right.
I'll obviously sort of like, loop in with them and sort of like check and touch base, but it is a lot of them sort of like doing the building, the creating, and they work with our project managers. Like for this one, it was a lady called June Fu who sort of like made sure that the process was all on track. So
Right.
it's a very very involved process and involves quite a lot of people. Yeah.
Right. But this brings me to you because I read an interview with you where you said the importance of being able to sell or present an idea, right? So how so the person who maybe came up with this idea or just mentioned something that led to that the White Noise album. Uh, how was that process, and what do you recommend people do? Because this can apply to anyone. I mean, it doesn't have to be just people at Lego. It can be anyone with a any job really, but also for people who are creatives. How do you sell an idea so the company actually let's say oh let's back this idea and let's put money behind it. What's that process like in your frame of mind?
Yeah, I mean that's a really really good question, man. And I think it's sort of like the same thing I sort of like tell most like young creatives, I guess, is that the first thing you need to be able to do is you need to be able to make the argument. So why did you do this? So even before you sort of like tell anybody about the idea, before you present it, you have to get your argument really really clean. Why did I do this? What kind of problem am I solving? Why do we as a company need to do this? Like Pixar has a lot of really good rules around, how you pitch a movie. And, one of the
Right.
questions they ask is why does this movie need to be made? And I think all of those things are questions that, like a young creative should first ask yourself. So you have your argument really, really in place. So if somebody says, okay, but is this necessary? You already, you have all of those things laid out.
Hmm.
And I think that's sort of like the hard working part. But I think then you got to just sort of like lean into it. It's like I think nothing sells an idea like passion. Like if you believe in
Right.
it, you go and tell that shit, man. Like you tell people that you're excited about it. And I think people if people see that you're enthusiastic about it, you believe in it. You're here for a reason, and people will sort of like kind of sort of like nod along with that. So for me,
Hmm.
it's this nice balance of sort of like strategically creating your argument and then just sort of like going batshit crazy and be a 10-year-old with a new toy and just want to tell people about it.
Right.
And I think, a lot of creators sometimes get one or the other. They're either really enthusiastic, but they haven't worked out the argument, or they've worked out their argument, but they're almost selling it to you in a way that's slightly apologetic, which again,
Right.
doesn't give people a lot of confidence. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
That's interesting. So the argument part, is there any specific questions you ask yourself or the team when you try to come up with this argument?
Yeah, I mean it's the basic sort of like who, how, why, what, when, right? It's like okay,
Right.
who. So ask yourself all of the who questions. Who's this for? How's it gonna, who cares about this? Who doesn't care about this and stuff like that. But typically, when we sort of like, when we do like a deck or things like that, we try and cover off. Okay, what's the what's the insight? What's the challenge? What's the objective? What's the solution? So depending on different ideas, you'll probably solve your argument a little bit differently.
Hmm.
But it's always about, I think it's always about sort of like going back to the core of it is that why are we doing this? Why is everybody going to commit the money, the time, the resources to invest in this? Is it good for us as a brand? Is it going to be beneficial? How do we sort of like, what's the value in this for a consumer as well? So
Right. I mean, this might be a
yeah.
stupid question, but on what you just said, but like someone like me, when I think about Lego in this case, I always think maybe it's cynical though, but I would always think, oh, it's obviously to sell more Lego, or is that not always the objective?
I mean, I think, we're still a product. So, sale is definitely a part of it.
Hmm.
But Lego is one of those companies where, I mean, I'm still fairly new to the company. I'm 2 years in, and it's still a family-owned business.
Right.
And they the company is still owned by the grandkids of the kid of the guy who sort of like still invented it.
Ah, I didn't
And
know that.
yeah, and if you sort of like, and again, I won't talk too much about the company's track record, but you'll see that the company's track record is it's very very focused on kids.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of easy wins that we could sort of like take and stuff like that. But I think as a company, we're always reminded by our leadership is that at the end of the day, we're here to do this for kids. And I know the natural inclination is sort of like your brand, aren't you sort of here to sell? And I think we are definitely a brand, but I kind of one of the reasons why I joined Lego is because it's got that culture It's got that inherent sort of like North Star is that we are here to help empower kids through play. And like I've been here coming on 3 years, and even if I was sort of like cynical, I'm sort of actually seeing the company function like that, which is really reassuring.
Hmm.
So I kind of like it.
Yeah, that's cool, man. But so going back to the argument part. So when you finish the argument, to say have a strong argument, um, how do you then validate? Maybe that's part of the argument too, I guess. But because when you release a product, you can maybe have a strong argument, and it all makes sense in your team's minds. But then maybe this no one really cares. Like I said, this white noise album. Maybe the argument was super clear, we're really passionate, but then no one cares. So how do you make sure like that is validated, that it is a valid idea? How do you do that?
Yeah. And I think that's for me, right, is like when every time you have an idea, the first place it exists is inside of your head. And you can have the best idea and you can spend weeks and weeks letting that idea live inside your head. But it isn't anything until it actually comes out of your head, until you share it with somebody else, until it's a very vulnerable sort of like thing, but until you take that idea out of your head and you put it in front of people and say, what do you guys think of this? And that's where an idea becomes really, really exciting. Like, you can think about something and say, oh, this is really nice. I like this. I want to do it. When you put that idea out into the world, you'll get feedback. You'll see people sort of like challenge it. You'll see people build on it. You'll see people sort of like give it little twists. And this of where you sort of decide how you're going to go forward, right? Like, are you going to crumble when you get all that feedback, or are you going to listen like a child and go, actually, that's kind of cool. That's a good idea. I'll use that. I'll build that. I may not use all of it, but I kind of sort of like see where it is. And I think that's the part that we struggle as creatives, right? When we have all these ideas in our heads and we put something out into the world, that it's very, very, there's an insecurity because what if people don't like it? This is mine. I made it.
Mm.
But that's when an idea becomes real. That's when an idea becomes exciting, and that's where you start seeing the gaps. And you start seeing it from different sort of like points of view, and that's the benefit of sort of like having like a team that you're really close with. We can share an idea, and somebody can say, "I like that. That part's stupid. This part is it should be changed." And you can say that without hurting anybody's feelings because everybody kind of is on the same wavelength. But
Mm.
that's the bit where you start understanding what are the flaws and what are the strengths.
Right. So you mentioned Pixar before, because I didn't read the whole book, but there was this Pixar book. I don't know who wrote it again. I think one of the founders.
Yeah, John Lasseter, I
Um,
think.
yeah, and he's talking about what you're talking about now, be able to, share ideas with team and get feedback. Is that how do you guys structure it in the same or similar way as them, where you should be comfortable telling your idea? And do you guys have a specific way of giving feedback to ideas, or?
No, not really, man, because I think, I think like the whole thing about processes is that processes are necessary if there isn't an organic trust in like the team. If everybody's sort of like just cool with each other and we're all sort of in a space where you can turn to the guy sitting next to you and say, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? We try and have as many conversations a day as possible. So we don't sort of like let an idea build too much before we share it with the next person, we share it with the next person, we share it with the next person. What we try and encourage is to just talk to people about it. Um,
Mm.
and like I think one of the hardest things for a creative to do is to acclimatize to rejection. For a creative, being able to acclimatize to rejection makes you fucking bulletproof because
Right.
if you think about some of the best creative personalities, right, it's we're all affected by rejection, but it's the ability to say that, yep, okay, rejection, and keep moving on, which is what sort of like separates the absolute greats from the guys who sort of like never were. Um, it's a challenge, man. Like we're all creative, and it's the worst thing for somebody to tell you that's shit. Um, but
How
when
do
you
you
get
deal with
used,
this?
um, I guess for me, it's more a case of separating the idea from the person. I tell my, like for me, like I know that a lot of my ideas are rubbish. That doesn't mean that I'll never have a good idea, or that doesn't mean that I've never had a good idea. It just means that in this particular space, this is not right. And the way I think about it is the failure ratio. The failure ratio is, we measure the failure ratio of different for different things, but for every 15 ideas you have, one will be actually interesting. And that's the world that we sort of like live in, right? There's so many new pieces of content, so many new ideas that we live in. How to actually create something new is almost impossible. So we have to get used to this idea that, the failure ratio is that you're going to fail a lot, but the more you fail, the better, the higher the chance that you get sort of like those one-offs. And we have in the team as well. We encourage everybody to sort of like kill your ideas. If it doesn't work, kill it, move on, let's do something else.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
That's something that's really difficult to do, and something I've struggled with too. Like when do you say, okay, this idea doesn't work, let's move on? Like, because this can be really confusing because you hear about people who persisted, they succeeded. So how do you guys draw the line of let's work on a particular idea until, do you give it a timeline, or is it on certain milestones? If it doesn't reach, you say, okay, let's drop this idea? Or when do you say let's keep going anyway?
I think it's going to be slightly different for different ideas. I think if we're doing something genuinely different, something that is really, really cut through, we tend to sort of like let the idea go a little bit longer, because a lot of the initial feedback you might be getting, that that's a bit weird, I don't quite understand that, it might just be from the fact that people haven't experienced that as an idea, or aren't familiar with it, or don't sort of like get it. But I think, at the end of the day, we're not creating anything that is, I mean, like if I compare us with art, like art is a very personal thing. It's very subjective. You can create a painting that everybody hates, but that doesn't mean that it's not art. It's art because you say it's art, right? So art is a very personal experience. For us, we're creating marketing. We're creating content that is meant to be enjoyed by a lot of people. We're not creating stuff that is, meant to be enjoyed just by ourselves, or just by a small, micro group of people. So for us, it's a little bit easier. When we sort of like open the idea up, we'll very quickly understand if this is a mass appeal idea, or if it's something that maybe we like, but isn't sort of like super sort of like cool for us. It's easier for us than it is for like musicians or artists and stuff like that, where you're creating something that is immensely personal. For us, we have guidelines where, is this right with the brand? Is the community going to like it? So
Mm,
for I think it's we just try and externalize it as much as possible, and then we understand. We learn and grow from it, I guess.
right. So what do you mean by externalizing it? What do you mean by that?
It's more sort of like, like the guys will have many ideas a day, right? But you won't know if that's a really really good idea, until you sort of like share it with people. So share with me, share with the rest of the team, share with people outside of the office, share it, with just a wider group. Maybe we'll sort of like plug into some real Lego fans and we'll ask them, what do you guys think of this? Because it's a scary process, because you might get feedback that's rejection. You might, the idea might die, but at the same time, it's sort of like pressure testing the idea. You take that idea out from your head and you externalize it to criticism and stuff like that. And the ideas that survive, or the ideas that do really well, are you have that sort of like fail safe kind of built in.
Right. Interesting.
Hmm.
So how do you ask for feedback in the best way possible, so you don't get, pointless feedback essentially?
Yeah. So I think sometimes you sort of like just have to trust yourself. The whole thing around, there's a balance between sort of like opening the idea up to lots of people, and then you get sort of like lots of feedback, and you're right, sometimes the feedback's really random, or it's not sort of like pertaining to what sort of like you're absolutely showing. So as much as you want to sort of like externalize an idea and get a lot of the generalist sort of like feedback, you have to sort of like trust what you can bring to the idea as well. So like your craft skills and things like that, and those are the things that you have to trust yourself a little bit, because even when the guys sort of like share an idea with me, I may have some like generally sort of like things that, okay, that's good, this is not nice, but I'm seeing the idea in its infancy, right? In your head it might be something much more developed, so you just have to trust yourself a little bit and apply sort of like your judgment. It's
Mm,
important in the creative process that you trust yourself as much as you want to sort of like get feedback and things like that. You do need to trust yourself.
right. And what
Yeah.
do you guys do if there's like a split 50-50? Someone, one part saying, oh, it's a great idea, another part saying, no, shit, let's scrap it. What's the process then?
That's why we have creative directors. I mean, at the end of the day, it is we like to know that sort of like the team, that that an idea can be improved and stuff like that. But we don't make it too much of a democracy, because at the end of the day, it's still, we still need to get stuff done. We can't let stuff sit in the system for too long. We have to have progress. We have to make hard decisions. And that's where it's sort of like, I'll lean in a little bit and say, okay, look, here, everybody, this is what we're going to do. Yeah.
And you being a creative director, is that because you're good at making hard decisions?
I don't know. Maybe, man. I don't know. Like, I think that I've come to accept the fact that I will be responsible for the decisions we make. And so basically, like if something goes, I mean, like we were talking about social media, man. Social media can go wrong fast. And at the end of the day, if that sort of like happens, then I know that that's my fault.
Mm,
So I don't think so I think I've gotten used to that, and because of it, I tend to put the ideas through a little bit more of a microscope. I tend to look at it a little bit closer, and I tend to just be a bit more sort of like unforgiving on certain content. Um, yeah, I think there's also the fact that I've got a lot more experience in the industry. I've been doing this for quite a while now,
mm,
so I think that those, leaning on expertise and stuff like that is part of it. I don't think I'm the most creative guy in the team. I think some of the younger guys are way more creative than I am. I think what my role is more about sort of like being able to put everything together, but also being able to sense check stuff before it goes out of the room and making sure that the final production, works with all the different components. But I'm by no means the most creative person in the room. Some of our guys have just been honest. They're crazy.
right.
Mm.
But so when you look at an idea the first time, beyond the argument like we spoke about before, but is there anything you always look for first to try to validate the idea for yourself?
Yeah. So I tend to look for how elegant it is. And what I mean by elegant is that um, the way you sort of like put all of the different components to form an idea, right? So like if I take sort of like what the guys did for white noise, they're looking at mindfulness as a way in, and they're looking at Lego as the enabler. They're looking at noise as a noise Lego makes, and then they're looking at sort of like mindfulness and the way people use white noise tracks, and they brought that together. And for me, that's what I call elegant. All the parts just sort of like meshed, and the new product is something that you go, that's kind of smart. That's kind of cool. There is no fat in an idea like that, but all of the different things that you've brought together um, is elegant. I'm not sure who it was. I think it was David Ogilvy who said that there are no new ideas. There are just
Hmm.
old ideas in new relationships, and that for me
Yeah.
is really interesting, right? Like how have you brought all of these old components into a relationship that goes, ah, that works. No,
Mm.
I didn't think of that. That's a really smart way to do it.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to be honest. And is there there's no formula obviously, but is there a way to get better at finding these new relationships? Like for example with the album?
Um, so I'm still a big believer in mind mapping. Where it's like a really old school sort of like creative sort of tool, and I don't think a lot of people do it anymore. But I start with like a big piece of paper, and I encourage the guys to start with like a whiteboard or whatever, and just write down a lot of stuff, man. Like the who, how, why, what, whens. Who cares about this? Who doesn't care about it? Who will hate this product? Who loves this product? Who would you give this to for Christmas? And then just start filling up a board with words, man. I kind of find that by the time you just go through all of those 5 questions, um, you'll have at least 10 interesting ideas. When you get to 30 interesting ideas, you'll have two good ones, and then you sort of like go from there. So I'm a big believer in the process of mind mapping, because I'm just not I'm not, I don't think I'm a fundamentally creative guy, but when you logically start breaking up a problem, you start seeing where they connect.
Hmm. That's really cool.
Mm.
But so so you just write anything that comes to mind when you look at those questions? Like who? You just say kids as an example. And then what? You just say, I don't
Yeah.
know, a balloon.
Yeah. So and the way the mind map works is right. Like I mean, there are a bunch of different ways to do it, but typically I'll start with a circle in the middle. Here's what we're working on today, and then I'll say who, kids. Okay, and then from kids I'll go kids. What else from kids? Kids friends, kids pets, kids.
Right.
And then you eventually sort of like you get into something. Oh, a kid's teddy bear. Okay, what if this story was told from the point of view of a kid's teddy bear? So, okay, so we've got one idea. Let's move on. And then you just sort of like see where it goes, and you say sort of like when. Oh, when. Like if this is for kids, maybe it's when you're awake, when you're sleeping, when you're at school, when you're dreaming. Oh, it's a teddy bear's dream, and then you start sort of like pulling all those things together. So it's one thought takes you to the next, takes you to the next, takes you to the next, which is what mind maps really help you do.
Hmm. That's really cool, man. I'm gonna utilize that method.
Yeah, there's some really good sort of like literature online about how it works, but it helps for me again because I don't just fluidly look at paper and have an idea. I'm bad at it,
Hmm.
but yeah, it's a good tool to get started.
But do you have any like those resources online? Do you have any examples for us to check out?
I don't. I've largely got this off of books again. Like I'm an older creative, so
That's all right.
most of the stuff came from a time when like we used to pull them out of books. But if you just Google mind mapping, there's a ton of different sort of really good sites that can explain it way better than I did.
Hmm. Okay, I
Mm.
will do that actually.
Yeah, you should.
Uh, yeah, awesome, man. But so obviously you worked with a lot of very big brands. I mean, not just Lego, but I mean, if I'm correct, like Sony, Toyota, Nestle, Mercedes, KFC,
Yeah.
etc., 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 etc. Having worked for all these huge brands, what, in your opinion, makes them stand out and be these brands?
I think, at the heart of it, the brands are not sort of like the marketing, the brands are what they've built. If you think about all of these sort of like, these fantastic sort of like entities, they're built on a really good product. Whether you're Toyota or whether you're Guinness, there is something there that is of value. What marketing does is that it helps you sort of like share that value in a much more effective way. But I think all of the best brands come from a place where at some point in time somebody believed in building this product this way, and that's where that brand started its journey. If the brand stuck to its journey, it's obviously going to sort of like do really really well. And I think that's one of the things for me, like at Lego, right? Like I really like the fact that we still have access to all of the core principles that were set in place way back when. We don't have a board of directors, so that doesn't change. It's still the vision of of the founder that lives in the company. And if that's a good vision, I think that's where your brand is really interesting. You can say that sort of like marketing plays a role, and marketing does play a huge role. But marketing can't tell interesting stories if there isn't an interesting story to tell.
Hmm.
And brands like Lego, Guinness, Mercedes, they have interesting stories to tell, and they have a good product that they're sort of like building.
Hmm. Interesting.
Mm.
But I think with Lego, I mean, I might be wrong here, but didn't Lego like do really badly, like a couple of years ago, maybe more than a couple, but and then this sort of came back. Yeah, what was that? I mean, I don't know if you're aware, if you know the story, but what happened there? Like, how did it bounce back, and why did it fall down? You know what I
I
mean?
think, yeah, I wasn't around the company, so I think that they're
Hmm.
definitely much more qualified people to speak about it. But I think it was a case of, we were a company, we did a lot of stuff, and then it got to a point where we just needed to sort of like refocus our abilities and sort of like, a lot of brands go through this where you get to a point in your life cycle where you just need to refocus, where you just need to go back to the core stuff that you were doing the best of. It's kind of like a band, man. You evolve and evolve and evolve and evolve, and after about like the fourth album, you're in a very different place from where you started, and you may have lost a lot of sort of like core consumers and stuff like that, or your listeners, and then you have that comeback tour. And that comeback tour is about sort of like going back to what you were strong at. And I think that's sort of like the journey that we've been on. I mean, like right now we're a massively strong place as a company, and it's largely because every time we've had to pivot and shift, we just listened to the fans, we listened to the consumers, and we've evolved our brand with them. So a brand as old as ours, there's going to be peaks, there's going to be troughs, but as long as you sort of like keep to what consumers love about you, or your fans, your audience, your listeners, your bandmates, whatever it is, man. But it's always about coming back to what are you about.
Hmm. Yeah, it's super fascinating. I mean, it's like going back to another question I did or asked you. Is there any again? Is there any specific questions you ask? You said what's our core a brand or whatever you want to call it. But are there any other things you ask to find back to yourself, so to speak?
As in, like, for me personally, or when
Or yeah,
we're.
like if, I know you weren't there for Lego now, but like if you've been in a situation like that before, where you try to find the core qualities of whatever brand you're working with.
Yeah, I think this comes down a lot to how the leadership works, right? Like in a lot of companies, there's a leadership that has structure and a lot of hierarchy, and you don't speak up to the CEO and stuff like that. Companies that bounce back, or that are able to pivot, or they're able to sort of like course correct and rebuild on themselves, have to have a culture where people can just open up and say, okay, this is what went wrong, this sucked, this is terrible. And I think that the culture of being able to sort of be honest about what didn't work and not sort of like paper it over, is really important, because nothing improves until you recognize why it was bad, or why sort of like something happened.
Mm.
It's one of the things that I love at sort of like Lego, is that we have a very, very open culture. I can speak to my boss or anybody at any point in time. They're an email away, and the culture just feels sort of like fluid. If you have a complaint, have a conversation, and I tell this to my team as well. If you think that I've done something that's shit, it's your absolute right to tell me that I'm doing shit, and we need to hear that, because if we're sort of like living in our own sort of like world, and sort of like believing our own kind of lies, that's not helpful.
Right. Interesting. So how,
Mm.
if someone does have a complaint, I don't think your employer would say, Primus, I think what you did is shit. But what's the best sort of way of coming to a person and saying, what you did there, I don't like what's the best way of approaching that part?
Um, I think as a there's two ways, right? I guess there's as a leader, and then there's as an employee. As a leader, I think it's your responsibility to create the environment where people are comfortable telling you that you messed up. That was not good. That was a bad decision. And I'm comfortable telling you that. So that's your responsibility, sort of like as a leader, where you have to encourage people to feel comfortable enough to criticize you.
Hmm.
I think as an employee, man, I think if you're in a space, and I hope like especially young creatives find a kind of role where they can be honest, and you don't have to be sort of like vindictive about the way you sort of like have feedback and stuff like that, but just be honest, man. Like, why did you not, why do you feel the way you do?
Hmm.
It's one of these things, man. Like, we're moving into a culture that we're very conscious about mental health in the workplace, and I think this is so important. It's going to become a much more important conversation, and I'm really, really glad for that, because we spent too long in the gears that we have from a professional environment. I don't mean at Lego, but we do need to all be aware that we are daily sort of like building a space where people are, they feel empowered to sort of like talk if they're struggling. They feel empowered to tell you if they have an issue with you, and people can just sort of like work through that. I don't believe anybody is fundamentally bad, and I think that if we're all sort of like leaning into it, um, it doesn't have to be, that painful a process.
Hmm. Interesting.
Mm.
So what are you guys implementing at Lego then to take care of employees' mental health and all that sort of stuff?
Lego, I think as a company does a lot of stuff. We have constant one-on-ones with our leaders. There's a lot of mental health promoting sort of like activities that we do within the company. I think now we're doing a partnership with Calm internally for the office as well. And I think it's good. I think there's a reason why we've ranked as highly as we have as employers globally. Is because it's one of those weird things where like it's very easy to go to a company and you sort of feel like everything that management says is kind of tinted with bullshit. But I've never really felt that at Lego. I kind of feel that when somebody says, "Hey, put people first," at Lego, they kind of actually mean it. They are actually sort of like pushing the leaders to sort of make sure that during the whole COVID situation, your team's doing okay, man. I mean, like, that's a huge priority for us. And as a new, like as a guy who's fairly new to the company, it was a hugely refreshing thing. But it's also, it's important. It is a very, very important one for us.
Yeah. It must have been weird for you, I guess, because was it your whole second year just been locked down?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I've been here about 2.5 years, and I've been in lockdown for about a year and 3 or 4 months now. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Hopefully it's gonna be over soon, man. Hope
Fingers
so.
crossed, man. Fingers crossed. It's weird in Singapore at the moment, but the country's managing it well, and everybody's doing their best, I guess.
Great. There's something I'd love to ask you about because you mentioned that you love books. I do too. So, what are some of your favorite books that have had the best impact on you? Like it could be fictional, it could be non-fiction too.
Yeah, I'm a big fiction person. I'm not a real nonfiction person. I'm not I
All
don't
right.
I'm not intelligent like that. But my favorite authors are like Douglas Adams, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
Mm,
anything from Terry Pratchett, Neil Gaiman, guys like that. Uh, I'm a big fiction dude. I'm not a yeah
right, right. Yeah,
yeah.
I just finished. I don't know if you're familiar with the what's his guy's name, James Clavel or something like that. He did like Shogun.
Oh
Are you
no,
familiar with
man.
that book?
No,
It
no,
was
I haven't heard.
it's,
I'll look it up. I'm always looking for recommendations.
yeah. I mean, just it was a real challenge reading it because it was so damn long. Like it took me 6 months to finish it.
Fair, fair.
It was
I've,
like twelve
I've,
hundred
I've gone
pages.
into, yeah, that's a
Yeah,
heavy one. Oh man.
yeah. And I don't know if I don't know if I liked it or not. That's the
Yeah,
that's the crux of it.
yeah, but you finished it. That counts.
Yeah, because I mean, we set a challenge. You want to finish it, even though it's a bit of a struggle, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I'll,
But
I'll,
yes,
I'll, I'll I'll take it out.
yeah, it's called Shogun, James
Shogun.
Clavel or something.
Got it.
It's pretty cool. Um, but Primus, before we wrap up, do you have a like a favorite failure that you thought was a failure, but in the end was a success? Could be personal, could be work related, anything.
Yeah. Like that's a really, really good question. At our agency, we have this thing called the Loser Awards, and
Yeah.
the Loser Awards are basically about celebrating all of the times and people and occasions and projects and campaigns that we failed at, but that we tried. So it's really about just encouraging the culture of, look, it's okay that if we don't get it completely right, but we have to try. We have to push big things. We have to dare mighty things is what we like to say. So we have this thing called the Loser Awards, and every year we have like this big, at the end of the year we try to do like a dinner thing, and then we celebrate. Okay, Dale Lum, you're the loser of the year because you tried these 5 things. You fucking failed, but that's good that you tried, because like I said earlier, like for every 15 sort of times we fail, we're going to get one thing right, but we can't get that one thing right until we fail those 15 times. So we do the failure awards, and I'm very big on sort of failure, and I think it's really just because I've defined my career based on a lot of failures. I've been fired a bunch of times. I've been, like I've been on the wrong side of the social media sort of situation, like,
Hmm.
backlash wise, not at Lego. I've grown up since, but yeah, I think especially when I was in advertising, especially in 4A's agencies, like, like more hardcore advertising agencies, I had a lot of failures, but they were more sort of like personal failures, just on me making, decisions based on fame and trying to sort of be somebody and push my team in a way that is not healthy. I don't think I was always sort of like the best leader, and I think that's where that was huge learnings for me, is that you can create good work and be a good person, um,
Right.
which was a learning for me, and I failed a lot trying to get that right. I don't think I've completely got that right yet, but those who for me were sort of like the failures were. But failures are a huge theme for us because we try and celebrate the shit out of
Right. I love that.
them.
So I mean, it's, yeah, encouraging. How do you say it? Encouraging?
Encouraging,
Okay,
encouraging.
encouraging failure, which
Yeah,
is really good.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think especially for like for young kids, right? You come into an environment, it's a professional space and it's huge and there's thousands of employees, and there's a huge fear with sharing an idea. It might be a fantastic idea. I mean, like the guys who came up, the core team on the white noise stuff, they're fairly young dudes, but for them to be able to sort of like stand up in front of a room and say, "Hey, I want to do this," you have to be okay with the fact that people are going to say, "Nope, that's shit." You have to be okay with failure, or you have to be able to sort of like to be able to try and then see it fall apart.
Yeah.
We try and make it just do it, man. I mean, like if it fails, that's okay, and
Mm.
we'll celebrate the fact that you tried.
That's awesome. So if you win
Mm.
that award, then what do you get?
It's not a huge official thing. It's just something I started for our team.
Oh, great. Right, right.
Yeah, so we do small prizes which are specifically Lego sets and things like that. But
Ah, cool.
yeah, it's more just to encourage people to try. Don't be
Yeah.
afraid of failure. Failures are awesome.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I love that, man. And you
Mm.
said you can be a good person and still do good work, which I also think is very nice to hear because me personally, having worked in the music industry, there's a lot of the opposite, where it's like almost, like being a chef. It's almost like you have to be, work every hour of the day and you got to treat your staff like,
Yeah.
they're, I don't know if maybe that's the same in your industry, I don't know, but yeah, I just love to say the fact that you can actually be a good person and still achieve the goals you have.
But that's the thing, right? There's a really unhealthy thing about our culture is where we associate excellence with being an asshole. And it shouldn't be the case. We see celebrity chefs who are hard on their employees. It's because they're after perfection. That isn't how you need to do it. I mean, like some of the world's best chefs are some of the world's best mentors as well. So, like guys like Thomas Keller and stuff like that were fantastic.
Hmm.
So I think it's, if I think about some of the mentors I've had, they're fantastic, fantastic creators and film directors and stuff like that. But they're, as much as they do great work, they're fundamentally good people. And I think that that's the balance that we have to get right.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, Primus, thank you very much for sharing all your knowledge. It was really fascinating hearing about ideas and how to cultivate them, how to judge them, I guess, and all that. So yeah, thank you for sharing all
Awesome,
that
man. Thank you
knowledge.
for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you, man. Thank you, Primus. Awesome to have you here, and I hope you, the watcher or listener, enjoyed it as well. Again, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the channel, whether that's on Apple Podcast or Spotify. Again, the channel is growing slowly but steadily, and that's all thanks to your support. So I really appreciate it. And also, before I let you go, if you want exclusive access to the interviews before the public, please subscribe to the Audio Tribe email list. There's a link to that in the description below. It's free, of course. Just enter your name and email address, and you have joined the Audio Tribe email list. But again, awesome to have you here. It's always a pleasure. I will see you next week. So take care and see you soon.